it is. We got a special guest in the house, a buddy of mine, a guy I hit up when I needed a pancake recommendation in Princeton, New Jersey. Ross Tucker of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, the Ross Tucker Media Network. Ross, how are we doing today, buddy?
Steve, great, man. Good to talk with you. Good to talk with Willie and Joey as well. I've seen a bunch of your guys' clips and watched it. I mean, by the way, whose idea was it to get you three guys together? Let's get Steven, like the Barstool podcast guy who also loves breaking down the film on the Bucs. Let's get the former football player from the Bronx, and then let's get the hilarious impressionist comedian, whatever you call him, from wherever Joey's from. Like, whose sick joke was this to put you three guys together?
So it was honestly like kind of happenstance because Willie and I worked. Well, actually, way back, Pat McAfee, when he was here, had a football podcast with AJ Hawk and Jerry Thornton. We parted ways with them in like February. Pat went his separate way, and then we had like sales commitments for the season. So I had been flagging this for months, and we were like, all right, yeah, like it'll happen, whatever. We had no plan. So in like August, I went to Dave at the time. I was like, hey, we have like ads we have to do. We don't have a show. He was like, all right. He's like, I'll just do it. I was like, okay. Is it cool if I produce? He was like, yeah, sure. Why not? And then he's like, let's get Willie and Tommy Smoke. So we had a show for a season. It ended after the Super Bowl, but Dave didn't want to do it after that. But I was like, hey, is it cool if, Willie and I do it? Tommy didn't want to do it either. So they were like, yeah, sure. Go ahead. So we launched it. And then, when Joey came on, he seemed like kind of a natural fit. He's a football guy, watches a ton of ball, and is a funny guy. So thought that was a perfect recipe for us three to get together. So that's what happened.
So it's so funny to find out that Joey lives in Indy, because I think the first time I found out about Joey, he was doing a Saban impression. And I was like, dude, this Southern frat boy is hilarious. I love this Southern frat guy. I just assumed, I don't know why, Joey, I just assumed you were a Southern frat guy because you had the Saban thing down so well. Like in my mind, you went to like Alabama or Auburn. You just watched so many press conferences. I didn't know you did other people. Like I thought the first video I saw of you was Saban. So I thought, okay, this is like an Alabama guy. But then I'm watching you do like Steelers stuff, and okay, he's a Steelers fan now. So I didn't know until right before we started that you're from Indianapolis. So basically none of the stuff that you do, the impressions or the Steelers fan, none of it makes sense based on your location whatsoever.
No, and I would have one, Andrew Luck, if he wouldn't have retired. That's one that I do as well. So that's the only one that ties me to where I'm from. But the look and the thoughts that I get when people find out that I've never been to an SEC game, I've never been to Alabama's campus or anything. They're the same thing. They're just like, what alien are you, and why do you care about? You know what I mean? So it's funny.
So I actually met Ross, what was it, like 3 years ago, at like a conference, and I forget how we met. Like we basically like linked up on Twitter and then like had a drink at like the hotel bar. And you're complimenting me with how I looked like Cam Brate with my physique. I remember we talked a lot over the conference. And
I don't remember that part of it, by the way, but okay.
I remember that's one you don't forget. But I remember we stayed in touch and stuff like that, and it's been good. Obviously getting a lot more familiar with your work. But talk to me about how you got started, kind of. You were, a football player in the league for several years, played for a bunch of different teams, the Skins, the Cowboys, the Bills, the Pats, and the Browns. How did you get started kind of in media? Because you're one of the first guys to do it.
So what's funny about that, by the way, so I am one of the first guys to do it on the podcast side and the writing side. But what's funny about it is I kind of gave up on the dream of playing in the NFL when I was like in 7th grade. I was like 5'2", 130 pounds. I was chubby. I was like the last one of my buddies to go through puberty. So I'm talking like the guys that are 5'9" now, okay? When I was 8th grade and 5'6", they were like 5'8". And my dad is 5'9", a buck 70. I swear to God, my dad's 5'9", a buck 70, was county golf champion. So I remember, growing up to like 7th grade, maybe I always wanted to play in the NFL. And I looked at my dad and I looked at my buddies. I was like, well, that's not happening. So then I thought, I want to be a broadcaster. Like, so in my mind, I wanted to go to Syracuse, Newhouse or whatever, and work for ESPN or write for Sports Illustrated, something like that. And then, dude, I just started getting bigger. I went like 5'6" in 8th grade, 5'9", 9th grade, 6 foot, 10th grade, 6'3", 11th grade, 6'5" as a senior. And next thing I know, I'm getting, scholarship offers and stuff. I almost played in Willie's league. My scholarship offers, Willie, were Delaware and William and Mary. So I would have played against Willie in, what was it back then? The Yankee Conference or the Atlantic 10, maybe?
Atlantic 10.
Yeah, back in the day. But then I thought, if I can go to Princeton or Harvard because of football, you got to be like, nobody from my family, nobody from Reading, Pennsylvania goes to Princeton or Harvard. So football is going to help me get it. By the way, the valedictorian in my high school did not get into either. That's all he wanted his whole life. And he didn't get into either. All I wanted to do was play football for Penn State. And I got into Princeton or Harvard. Because I felt so bad walking down the hallways. I was like, dude, see, while you were studying, I was lifting weights trying to get into the top schools. So went to Princeton and honestly just kept getting bigger. I still didn't think about the NFL, to be honest. And then you know what happened? My freshman year, I started a couple games at D end and I played against Harvard and they had a left tackle named Matt Burke. Oh, yeah. And I got a bunch of snaps against him. And then he got drafted that spring in the 6th round. I'm like, wait a minute. And they moved me to offensive line. So I was like 260 as a freshman. I went home to Pennsylvania over Christmas break. We got a keg of Yingling every night. We went to the diner at 2 a.m. every morning. I came back at 284. They were like, over winter break, what did you do? I'm like, I don't know. Like Christmas break was like 5 or 6 weeks. I just drank. I mean, it was the first time back from college. So I gained like 25 pounds. They're like, dude, you're going to move to O-line. I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. And then they kind of said to me, you could really maybe, they didn't say NFL, but you could really be special on the offensive line. So anyway, I switched. And I just remember thinking, if Matt Burke can get drafted, maybe I can get into a camp or something. So fast forward, ended up getting signed by the Washington football team, Schottenheimer. I made it, played 7 years. And the whole time I was a player, I kind of forgot about the media stuff. Because Willie can tell you, but like 2 things. One is all the best jobs, look at all they all go to like the guys that are Hall of Fame, Pro Bowl players. I knew that wasn't going to be me. And secondly, like every guy says they're going to be an announcer or broadcaster. So I did Merrill Lynch. When I was with the Cowboys, I worked for Roger Staubach, his commercial real estate company. Like I looked at every year as a temp job. But then the NFL had a broadcasting boot camp. I went to it, the first one they ever had. Yeah. Willie, did you go to it?
Yeah, I did. I went to both of them. Okay,
yeah. So I went to the first one they ever had because I remember thinking, I'll get a job in finance, but I got to do something football. And it went pretty well. And then after that, Peter King was at what they called Redskin Park. I don't even know what they call it anymore. It's literally called Redskin Park was the name of the building. And I saw Peter King in there. And my big takeaway from the broadcast boot camp was that a lot of guys can talk on TV for 15 seconds or maybe even the radio. But I wanted to write, Princeton, I had to write like 30-page papers on Machiavelli. And, I wrote a 130-page thesis on Title IX. So I'm just thinking everybody's getting their information from the internet, but nobody's actually writing. Like no former players are actually writing or current players. So I told Peter King my idea. He loved it. He said, keep notes, what happens during training camp. Well, it turns out this is back, Joey and Willie, when they had the 4-man wedge.
Oh,
We're
wow.
playing Baltimore in the preseason. I herniate my C5, C6, bruise my spinal cord. And I said to the doctor, I'm like, well, what do you think? He's like, I think you're 28 and you went to Princeton. You need to get a real job. So that was my 7th year. And honestly, like on some weird level, I was like relieved. Like I was that guy. I would have tried to play forever. I mean, if anybody would have ever signed me, I would have kept playing. So to have a doctor say like, dude, you bruised your spinal cord, like you should be done. it almost like gave me closure or a sense of like, okay, I got a doctor telling me I can't play. Like, okay. And so I wrote that for Peter King. This is the God's honest truth. I wrote about my injury and my career being over in his Monday Morning Quarterback in 2007. I had like 3 media jobs in 2 weeks.
Wow.
I had Comcast TV, Sirius XM radio, writing for Sports Illustrated. So like I wasn't even like planning on necessarily having a media career, but after I told Peter King my idea and he let me write his Monday Morning Quarterback, like it just kind of happened. And then what's really funny for our conversation, by the way, I just got a haircut. I have this like one hair that keeps coming back over to the wrong side. Supercuts, by the way. It was my 13th one, so it was free. Amazing.
There you go.
So here's the deal. Like after 2 years, Steve, of writing for Sports Illustrated, ESPN hires me away. And they're like, we want you to write for us. It was a bunch more money than Sports Illustrated. So I was like, all right, sweet. They're like, also, can you host our podcast? And I literally, Joey and Willie, I said, absolutely, I would love to. Had no idea what a podcast was. None whatsoever. It's either 2009 or 2010. I just knew
back then.
Nobody knew what it was. I just knew they were going to pay me money to talk about football every day. I was like, let's do it. Now I found at the time, I think the only people that had podcasts were like Adam Carolla and maybe Bill Simmons, maybe. So I did 3 years of the ESPN everyday football podcast. They paid me well. We started to get advertisers. I was like, this is sweet. And the advertisers, I started to get relationships with the advertising agencies and the advertisers. And they were like, Ross, you're our second best conversions or whatever, right after Colin Cowherd. I was like, oh, interesting. So I tell my agent that, and I'm thinking I'm going to get a big renewal. But then I hear through the pipeline that ESPN's not going to renew me because I was doing Pro Football Talk with Florio 2 or 3 nights a week on NBC. And ESPN's like, wait a minute, we can't have our football guy, podcast guy, be on NBC TV. So when I caught wind of that, I got my own website set up and I basically called like Sherry's Berries, 100 Flowers, State Farm, like everybody that was advertising on ESPN. I was like, hey, I'm starting a new podcast and I wanted you to be the first to get my introductory pricing. And they were like, all right, yeah, you've been awesome. Let's do it. So it's kind of like the whole Peter King thing where I got lucky just by telling him I wanted, like I literally walked into the media room when I saw him and just told him I wanted to write. He's like, all right, let's do it. I got even luckier with the podcast thing because I had like a profitable podcast business just because ESPN, I found out they didn't want me anymore. So anyway, that was like 2013. A year later, I added the Fantasy Feast because I saw everybody's doing fantasy. A year later, which was, thank God, I started Even Money podcast because I knew betting was big. And then the college draft, and Andrew Brandt does business of sports. So anyway, been doing it ever since. I've got like this podcast business. And you guys know this. If I try to start a podcast now, no shot, bro.
Too late.
No shot. There's too many of them. It's too hard. But I guess they call that first mover advantage. I just started before everybody else did. Thank goodness. Because back in the day, people were like, oh, how many times are you going to tweet about your podcast? I'm like, a lot, like I'm trying to grow this thing. So
Ross,
anyway, that's the story.
I don't even think you give yourself a credit. I think you said it earlier when you started telling the genesis of your story. A lot of athletes don't write. Outside of doing our notes and preparing for games, a lot of athletes hate to write. That's why the Players Tribune and a lot of these other sites really, really are kind of new wave, because I think a lot of athletes will probably come off better and sound better if they just stick to writing instead of talking. And I don't mean to sound that ignorantly, but I think so many guys get in, and I said this to a lot of young guys in the locker room, because the New York media can be fucking brutal. And I would see a lot of guys when the camera was away from them, they actually sounded articulate. They could finish sentences. They were good. They were fine. But when the light was on them and they felt like they were getting pigeon or kind of, pigeonholed or put in a corner, or they were asked a question that was going to put them in a bad light, they froze and they stuttered and they muttered, and you put that with a Southern slang, and it sounds like, holy shit, this guy, he just graduated from the 3rd grade. So I wish guys would more take into writing and really dove into like, listen, man, let me just get my thoughts on paper, and then I can digest what I'm really trying to get out.
So that's really interesting, Willie. So 2 thoughts on that. One is I get a little frustrated by the Players Tribune in the sense that that's usually just a guy talking on the phone with a writer, and then the writer writes what they say on the phone.
Oh, wow.
Like my stuff, I
right.
actually write it. You know what I mean? Like I type every word, and I'm not saying like, honestly, like my best thing in academics is I'm a BS artist. So like writing just always came, like I could just, my roommates hate it. I'd write like a 10-page paper, like in an hour, like, blah. I would just spell check it and then be done. So so when I see like the Players Tribune, it's like, okay, but that's not really him writing it. My other one is a question actually for Joey. Joey, do you write all your stuff? Like how you have to write all your stuff out, right?
In terms of like the sketches and things like that, or
yeah, or even just like the impressions. Like, do you write the words you're gonna say, or is it all just sort of like your freestyle rapping?
No, probably 90% of it is I come up with a situation. I have the character I'm doing. I open up the camera and I let it rip, and then I, what I like and I keep, and then so I kind of go into it with like a general idea, but I always like to like try to challenge myself in my head where I'm just like, all right, anybody can, not anybody, but like you can get a script out and then just read off of it or whatever. But like in my head, it's tougher to be like, all right, Collinsworth at a Starbucks, go. And then you just, and then I try to like challenge myself to like really become that character and try to pull it off that way. So probably 90% of it is just letting the camera go and ripping it.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So you mentioned I want to go back to your Princeton days. So my guy Kyle Brandt, did you play with him there? Did you cross paths with Kyle Brandt at Princeton?
Oh, Joey, you have no idea, bro. College roommate, college teammate, fraternity brother, one of my 3 to 5 best friends in the world. Yeah.
How did I not? What? I had no idea.
Yeah. So legitimately, it's funny because I never know how much to share or not to share about the college days, but Kyle was a good running back. Like Kyle was a good Ivy League running back. He was from Chicago. I mean, our first game in the new stadium sophomore year, Kyle had over 100 yards rushing. And then what's so funny is senior year, Joey, and we were roommates junior year because freshman, sophomore year, you can't live together. We were roommates junior year, then he wanted a single senior year, whatever. But we were roommates junior year, but we were fraternity brothers. Like I was literally the fraternity president right after Kyle. But senior year, when I was doing a workout for the Bengals, my agent, Joe Linta, who Willie knows, Willie's agent too, he's like, listen, nobody knows about you, dude. You're bottom of the barrel. We got to get them some footage. So when the Bengals came to Princeton to work out, and they really were working out my teammate, Dennis Norman, who played 9 years, and he ended up getting drafted by the Seahawks. He was like a physical, he had no business being in the Ivy League, none. But so I went and worked out with Dennis because I was trying to get noticed. Kyle came down with like an old school video camera, 2001, and filmed the whole workout. Now, don't ask me why, Joey, but I'm like 310 pounds, but I thought I was like looking sweet. So I did the workout shirtless. Like I did the workout shirtless. And here's the thing, to make sure I looked sweet, I was fake tanning. I was fake tanning that winter because in my mind, when the scouts came in, I wanted to look like, I wanted to be 310, but I wanted to like look decent. Like, yeah. So I had this video that Kyle shot of me, like I'm red, like I'm not tan, I'm like burnt, and I'm shirtless. And the funniest thing about it is Kyle took that video and I sent it to a bunch of teams. When Washington signed me, they said to my agent, it was Tony Sperano, rest in peace, and Joe Pendry. They laughed. They thought it was hilarious that the Princeton guy thought like he looked sweet and had no shirt on. So when they were done at the end of the draft, they're like, they need to sign like 2 more guys. They're like, one of them, I think it was Tony Sperano, who knew my agent from New Haven, said, let's sign the shirtless Ivy League dude. Let's get the Ivy League guy that didn't wear the shirt. So that's like part of how I got signed. And then what's really funny is I videoed Kyle doing stuff, Joey, for the Real World interview. Because Kyle ended up going on the Real World. So I videoed Kyle, and then the Real World called me MTV, I talked to them for like an hour and a half. Like that's the vetting that they did. They wanted to know everything about Kyle. And Kyle's like, dude, you got to be 100% honest. I was like, okay. So I was really honest about a lot of different things, and it worked, and he got on it. So then we went from like spring of senior year. All of our buddies have finance jobs. They're all doing Wall Street, right? 4 months later, I'm in the NFL and Kyle's on the Real World. So like just picture like, picture any college you're at, you're all just quote unquote normal, right? And then 4 months later, we're both like quasi famous, right? Or at least we're doing something that nobody else is doing. And I still, to this day, it probably only lasted 1 year, but I made more money my first year out than all those Princeton cocksuckers, all those kids that are way smarter than me. So then Kyle did Days of Our Lives. Like Kyle came to my wedding while I was on Days of Our Lives. He apologized to my mom because he had a beard, because he knew my mom wouldn't love that he was wearing a beard at my wedding. And my mom watched every day. She's like, no, Kyle, it's okay. I understand. You're behind enemy lines, and we don't know if you're going to be able to make it back to Emily in time for the birth of your child.
That's incredible. So me and Kyle, I talked with him, and we joked about we're both members of the like 1 or 2 snap head size, like with a snapback hat. Like we're giant heads, right? So we only have like the 1 snap that we can do on our snapbacks. Are you a part of that as well? You a fellow?
Oh yeah. I'm 1 or 2 max. But then where I really separate myself, Joey, I'm not just long. I mean, I'm not just wide around. I'm crazy long too.
You kind of look like a Vanderbeek.
Everybody says that. And, when I fill in for the Dan Patrick Show, they call me Meathead James Vanderbeek. I'm Meathead James Vanderbeek. But in all sincerity, like Willie, I don't know how you feel about this. So I have short arms, right? Like it was my worst thing as a player.
Right.
But I had a big head. I'll never forget when they first started getting those lighter helmets, and they were like, hey, this helmet only weighs 2 pounds. And the one you're wearing right now weighs 8. I'm like, the hell are you talking about? I want the one that weighs 8 pounds. I'm a battering ram. I don't want the one that's lighter. So literally my first move when I went up to a linebacker, because I was usually center guard, would be to kind of butt them, headbutt them so that they kind of blink their eyes and I can get my hands inside. So now, knowing what we know now about CTE and repetitive hits to the head, I am so screwed. And but we didn't know. Really, we didn't know. I'm so pissed.
This is the worst thing you can do.
Like, people always say this, like, would you still play football? Like, knowing what I know now, I would still play football. But I don't think I'd be a total moron out there headbutting every guy I can like a rooster. I don't think I'd be out there headbutting everybody. And so if I wasn't that mean and headbutting everybody, would I be as good? Like, would I even have made it? I don't know.
Yeah, for the longest, I remember, every year you got to turn in your helmet for safety inspections. And I would hide my helmet. I wouldn't turn over my helmet. Because each year, like I had the old school Rydell, the real, it's still here. I think I got it. Yeah, I still got it. This is the old one. Oh, I just fucked something up. But this is the old one.
Look at that.
Remember this one?
The old yes. One? That's awesome. Hold on 1 second.
This one has been rejected 9 or 10 times. So you got the same one. Yep. This one saved your life. I got my dread, so it won't fit.
Dude, we should do a podcast where we just wear our helmet the whole show.
I have no problems with doing that.
The helmet
Dude,
out.
how is this still so tight? I weigh like 60 pounds less. Dude, this is hurting my forehead right now.
But look at the inside. This right here. They be like, this is supposed to put air in here. There's no air in here. So it's just like a hard ass mattress in my brain.
Hey, you guys are gonna look. Mine's the same.
Yeah.
Look,
That's it.
there's no air.
Nothing.
You know how guys get air pumped in? I never even knew what they were doing. I never did that once.
Not once.
I got all the air I need up here.
Yep.
Hey, so this is the truth. Joey, listen to this. When I got cut by the Cowboys, okay, I started the last 7 games for them in 2002. My first game, Emmitt Smith broke the all-time rushing record, whatever. Parcells comes in. Parcells cuts me after minicamp when Leroy Glover was annihilating me. And so I'm like, I couldn't believe I was getting cut, but whatever. So I go in and I say to the equipment guy for the Cowboys, I was like, hey, can I keep my helmet? You know, like I started the last 7 games. Like I started for the Dallas Cowboys. Like not many people can say that. It's kind of cool. Like it's the star on the side of the helmet. And he said, well, Jerry looks at that like it's his property. So you can keep it, but we got to payroll deduct your $300.
Oh no.
$6 billion, bro. $6 billion. And they payroll deducted. I got a better one for you. Willie, you played for 2 teams?
Yeah, Steelers and Jets.
All right. So I played for 5. I shit you not, okay? Out of the 5 teams I played for, the only team that charged you for lunch, the Dallas Cowboys.
No way.
Oh,
I can't remember if it was I think it was $100 a week they would payroll deduct from your check for lunch. And they served the crappiest. It was all like fried chicken and I don't know, like gravy and what do you guys call them with like the collard greens and all that stuff? I don't even know what that stuff is. It was all like, it was not healthy stuff. And it was $100 a week. So I went to the finance guy. I was like, what is this? And he's like, oh, that's for lunch. I'm like, $100 a week? He's like, yeah, but look how much money you're making. You don't even notice it. I'm like, no, I notice it. I notice it. That was their answer to everything. You won't even notice. No, like I
went to Princeton, okay?
Yeah, I noticed everything. So I said to him, I'm like, all right, how about this? Starting next week, I'm going to bring in 2 turkey and cheese sandwiches on wheat for lunch every day. And you guys stop paying deducting me the $100. He was like, he had no idea what he was like. He had no idea what to say. But yes, the only team that ever charged me for my helmet or lunch. This is the Dallas Cowboys charge you for lunch. Now they probably don't do it anymore, but is that not unbelievable?
How do you think they're affording Dak Prescott at $40 million a year?
There you go.
It's a lunch.
I mean, and it was the crappiest food I ever got, ever.
Jets lunchroom was amazing. It was like Michelin star. Steelers food was amazing. Jets food was like, it should have been on Fifth Avenue. It could have been a restaurant. It was lights out. Maybe that's why we sucked, because our food and all the talent was in the kitchen. Shit.
How often did you talk to Jerry when you were there? What was your relationship like with him?
Such a great question, because my previous experience was in Washington, and Daniel Snyder only talks, Joey, to like the best 5, maybe 7 or 8 guys on the team. Actually, forget talks. He only will look at the top 6 or 7 players on the team. So what's funny about that is I make the team as a rookie. My second year, I'm starting in the preseason for Spurrier. I'm playing really, really well. Washington Post does this big story on me, right? I'm walking down the hallway with Chris Samuels and John Jansen. I don't know if Jansen was in the club, but Samuels definitely was. And Daniel Snyder's coming the other way. And I'm in front. Daniel Snyder looked at me, opened his mouth, and then thought better of it and kept walking. And all the guys, Jansen and they're like, oh my God, Tuck, you're so close. You almost made it. You almost got in the club. Like the fact that he looked at me and opened his mouth and thought about talking to me was like, oh my gosh, I'm like a top 20 player. I'm like legit, I've made it. And then compare and contrast that with my second year, halfway through the season, Spurrier cuts me. Okay. And I get picked up on waivers by the Cowboys. So I'm from Philly. I grew up an Eagles fan. I go from being a Redskin to a Cowboy in a day. I have to go into Redskin Park. Again, that's the name of the building. I'm not like saying the name to say the name. And I go pick up my stuff. Like I clear my locker out to get a plane that night to Dallas. And I see Spurrier. By the way, Joe, I don't know if you do any Spurrier impersonations, but you should. I see Spurrier and he's like, Cowboys, huh? And I said, yeah. He's like, don't be telling him any of my secrets. Don't tell him my secrets.
Was he wearing his visor?
What's that?
Was he wearing his visor when he
Yeah, of course. He was the best coach ever, though, because if it rained, he just canceled practice. If it rained even a little bit, he just canceled practice. So he goes, don't tell him my secrets. I was like, okay. Meanwhile, on the plane to Dallas, I'm writing down every call the Redskins have, every protection. Don't tell them my secrets. First of all, your secrets suck, dude. They're terrible. I don't know how you're so successful in college because we had 2 protections. They were terrible. So anyway, I go to Dallas, and the next day they have like a rental car for me. The next day I have my first practice. I'm leaving, I'm driving out of, what's it called? Cowboys Ranch or Valley Ranch, whatever they call it.
Valley Ranch, yeah.
I'm leaving out. As I'm leaving, I see Jerry Jones walking out of the building towards where I'm about to leave, like the exit. He's in a full suit and tie, walking towards where I'm about to leave, and I'm in this rental car, and I'm in like a little crappy rental car. I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on here. And he comes right up to the car. And so I stop and I roll down the window and he's like, hey, Ross, I just want to. Now, see, you can't be the dude trying to do impressions on the show with Joe. You can't do that.
No, your Spurrier was spot on.
So anyway, he's like, Ross, I just want to introduce myself to you. I'm Jerry Jones. We're real happy to have you. And to be honest with you, I thought that was awesome because I had never even met Snyder. You know what I mean? Like I had never met Snyder. So for Jerry Jones to actually walk over to my crappy rental car, walk out of the building, like, I don't know, somebody must have told him, that guy you signed just left. And he's like, well, what car is he? I don't know. I don't know how he knew, but he shakes my hand and he was like, we're really happy to have you. We need you. I was like, awesome. And then a couple weeks later, I was starting and he said something to me after, oh, we beat Washington. This was so sweet. So like a month after I got cut like mid-October, we have another injury. So I'm starting at left guard for the Cowboys. So 2 things that are hilarious about this. Number 1, they would list Larry Allen as questionable every week with an ankle injury so that the teams couldn't like game plan for it. So every week when I started, instead of Larry Allen at left guard, you've never seen dudes so happy in your whole life to see me. Like, the D linemen for the other teams were like, oh, I'm so glad it's you. Thank God it's Tucker, dude, and not Larry Allen. It's a little weird. It's not a good feeling for your confidence when the defensive linemen are really happy that you're there. Like that doesn't instill a lot of confidence. But then 2 weeks later, I'm starting on Thanksgiving for the Cowboys against the Redskins, who had just cut me a month earlier. My roommate, who was on the team, he played for the Redskins, Alex Solfstead, he brought my mail to midfield before the game. And like, there was dudes like Brian Barker, the punter, he's like, I've been in the NFL 15 years. I've never seen a mail exchange at midfield. I've never seen that. So anyway, so we beat the Redskins. It was awesome because we won, which is amazing. Secondly, like, everybody watched the Thanksgiving Day game. Everybody, okay? So we beat them, and it was great. The next day, you get the whole weekend off if you play on Thanksgiving. The next day, I fly back to Philly, and that night was my 5th year high school class reunion.
Oh.
Like, are you kidding me?
Wow.
Are you your 5th year class high school reunion? You start for the Dallas Cowboys the day before for Thanksgiving. I walked in there like every girl that wouldn't hook up with me. I just stared them all down. I just stared them out. I was like, "Hey, Barbara, how are things going? Did you have a nice thing?" "Oh yeah, I was busy. I couldn't be with my family, unfortunately." "No." "Hi, Christy, how are you?" Like it was like there's like movies about this shit, right? There's movies where it's like all I want is for my 5th year high school reunion to start the day before for the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving and have every single one of my classmates watch on TV and then have to look at me the next day. It was amazing.
The best part about that story is I know those are real names. I know those are real
Oh
names.
yeah. You know what's really funny? Last time I did it, last time I told that story to somebody, I said Jill, and like I'm still friends with Jill and her husband. So I texted her and I was like, "Hey, make sure Rob knows you didn't really try to hook up. I didn't really try to hook up with you in high school. You were just the first name that came into my head." And I texted her the link. She's like, "Oh, that's amazing. He'll love it."
That's
That's great.
See, Jerry came to meet you because he knew he was trying to sweeten you up so he could charge you for that $100 for the lunch. That's what.
And the 300 for the helmet.
Exactly. You know, he's winning you over. That way he can slide in on the backside and profit.
You know what? It really is funny though. Like rich people, there's no such thing as being so rich that you don't care about smaller amounts of money. It doesn't exist. Like, so that year, when I was telling you guys earlier, when I hurt my neck and my career was over, the doctor originally wrote down that it was a 12 to 14 week injury minimum. Okay. But then he said to me, "Go ahead and, you shouldn't play anymore." And I got another doctor that said, "You should never play again." Fast forward 12, 14 weeks later, the doctor calls me and says, "Yeah, Washington wants to know if they can release you to get out of paying you for the last 3 weeks. Because I originally wrote down 12 to 14 weeks. And I was like, "No." I'm like, "I'll file a grievance and I'll win." Like, no. Right. I'm like, "You told me never to play again. And the other doctor told me never to play." I'm like, they really care that much about 3 game checks, which is probably like $45,000. And his response was, "You've never met Daniel Snyder, have you?" Oh, they wanted those 3 weeks back. By the way, okay, one last story I got to tell about this, okay?
Yeah.
Because this is legendary. So that last season I told you guys about when I hurt my neck and I knew my career was over, I was on IR for the Redskins the whole year. But I knew my career was over. I didn't go to any games or practices. I literally gave my tickets to like Court Putnam so I could get free furniture. Like I knew I was done. Like I didn't care. But when you're on the IR, you get paid just like everybody else. So fast forward to New Year's Eve. Me and all my high school buddies get together in Charleston, South Carolina. The Redskins are playing the Cowboys that day. If the Redskins win, they make the playoffs, which means $18,000 more for me. If they lose, I get nothing, right? The Cowboys had already clinched number 1 seed. So I'm with all my buddies from high school, and like 20 minutes before the game, I tell them, like, we're all getting ready to get beer. I'm like, "Yo, I got to watch the Redskins game." Like, "Why? You don't care?" I'm like, "Well, I kind of do care about this one." They said, "Why?" I'm like, "Well, if the Redskins win, I get $18,000. If they lose, I get nothing." And immediately, I'm from Reading, Pennsylvania, right? So immediately 3 of my buddies whip out their phones. They're like, "Dude, let me call my bookie. You got to put $9,000 on the Cowboys right now. You got to hedge. You got to hedge and put $9,000 on the Cowboys right." I'm like, "No, I'm not doing that." Like, "Ross, you got to guarantee yourself $9,000. I'm like, "No, I'm not doing that." Because somehow one of my buddies would tell somebody, and it would be like a big scandal. I was like, "No, I'm not doing that." But I will say this. Being 27 years old or 28, being with all your high school buddies, getting hammered while you're watching a football game, you have $18,000 on the line. That is unbelievable. That is like the most into a football game watching on TV I've ever been. And the Redskins won. So I paid for everything that night, New Year's Eve. But that was like, it was like free money. It was like was like high school Taco Bell money in your couch. Like it was unbelievable. So that's like my only experience with like big money betting. And I guess I couldn't have lost $18,000, just the opportunity cost of $18,000. But still, 3 of my buddies had their bookies on speed dial to put $9,000 on the Cowboys to have. Like, I won't tell anybody. Just give me 10%. I won't tell anybody.
That is awesome. I love that.
Story.
Ross, I don't think we got into anything you wanted to get into, Steve, but I think it's much better.
That's fine. I was just going to ask you, do you have like 10 or 15 minutes and we can just go through some more free agency stuff? Or you got to
I have 5 more minutes.
Okay. All right. Let's quickly touch on free agency and we'll make this the full episode. Obviously, love hearing all those stories. Those are awesome. The owner stories are incredible. All right. Quickly, free agency. So we saw this year, obviously a very different year. The salary cap went down from 198.2 to 182.5. Obviously very strange due to the pandemic. But we still did see some guys get paid. The Patriots were super active. You know, Kenny Galladay over the weekend just got a ton of money from the Giants in a down year. What are some moves, Ross, that you really liked or didn't like in free agency?
Yeah. So with rare exception, right? You can see the teams that are kind of desperate for one reason or the other. Yep. So like the Giants, I talked to a decent amount of people around the league. Nobody else was going to pay Kenny Galladay close to that. Nobody else was going to pay Adoree Jackson close to what he just got. I don't know what they're doing. I mean, Adoree Jackson was on the 5th-year option for the Titans for $10 million. The Giants could have traded a conditional 7th-round pick to have Adoree Jackson this year for $10 million. Instead, they went ahead and signed him 3 years, $39 million. Crazy. Over $20 million fully guaranteed. This guy has missed 18 of a possible 32 games the last 2 years. Like he wasn't good enough for the Titans to give him $10 million. But the Giants can give him all that money. And then Galladay has a couple of different issues. But, man, I had heard $11 million a year was being offered to him, $12 million. The Giants gave him $18 million a year, $40 million fully guaranteed. All that tells you is that Dave Gettleman knows, the Giants GM, he needs to win this year or he's done. Same with like the Arizona Cardinals, bringing in A.J. Green, J.J. Watt, trading for Rodney Hudson. You don't pay more than anybody else for a bunch of 30-year-old guys, 30-plus-year-old guys, unless you have to win that year. And the one I think is really interesting, I don't think Bill Belichick needs to win this year, right? Like, he's not going to get fired if they have a bad year.
Yep.
But if they have another crappy year, it kind of takes away all of the prestige and the culture that they've built up. Like, you know, it's still the Patriots and the Patriot way and all that stuff. They only had one down year. But if they're crappy again this year, I think people have short memories, man. I think the Patriots needed to do what they did this year, this offseason, to try to win double-digit games. Like, they're not going to win the Super Bowl, but to win double-digit games to make the playoffs, so that the culture and the aura of Belichick and playing for the Patriots is still there. I think they really realized that their very culture was sort of at stake, which is why they spent so much. But usually that's the answer. Like the teams that spend a lot, especially spend what appears to be too much, usually it seems like it's because they're desperate for one way or the other. Those are 3 that jumped out to me in that way.
I'll get you out of here on this. 2 quick ones, just because you're an offensive line guy. 2 teams that had some interesting moves were the Chiefs, who let go of their 2 tackles who are older, and their center, and they signed Joe Tooney to big money. They went after Trent Williams, didn't get him, but they got Kyle Long out of retirement. And then the Raiders, with obviously a very surprising release, which ended up being a trade of Rodney Hudson and then trading Trent Brown back to the Patriots. What are your 2 thoughts on those 2 teams and what they did?
Well, listen, as far as the Raiders is concerned, Steven, you know the old adage. If you have a chance to trade away 3/5 of your offensive line so that you can sign a backup running back to way too much money when your starter's already awesome and your defense still sucks, You got to do it. I mean, you got to take those opportunities when you have them.
Old as time.
Unbelievable. And then for the Chiefs, there's a lot there, man. So first of all, only the NFL, right? Like Eric Fisher had Achilles surgery in February. Mitchell Schwartz had
AFC
back
Championship
surgery
game, he got hurt
in February. And then in March, they get cut. The only thing that would have been better is if they called him in the hospital after the surgery and asked him how the surgery went. You feeling okay? Okay. You're fired. I mean, only the NFL can you do that and not owe the guy another dollar. Not another dollar. Torn Achilles and back surgery. The thing about Joe Thuney that I think is interesting, most teams that have given big money to guards, they haven't really been that happy about it. Like the Giants didn't like paying Zeitler that much money.
Norwell.
Jags just got Norwell to take a pay cut. Even almost across the board. I'm trying to think of other guys, but there's other guys that they don't love that they're paying a guard that much money. Right? Trey Turner with the Chargers, they cut him.
Yeah.
I think, and this would be an interesting debate for some other show. Maybe I'll have Willie come on the Ross Tucker podcast sometime to debate this. You need to have a good offensive line. The most important factor to have a good offensive line is to not have anybody that sucks. Seriously. So like I wonder, like Joe Thuney, right? Like over $15 million a year, or even Brandon Sheriff, $18 million.
Yep.
In a given game, let's say there's 70 snaps, and those guys get a plus, which means they did their job on 68 of them. An average player, I don't know, Will, you and I talked about this way back then. An average player, maybe they get 65, 66 pluses.
Right.
So are those 2 plays a game worth like $15 million a year? In other words, I wouldn't pay Joe Thuney that much money or Brandon Sheriff that much money. I'd rather pay 3 guys $5 million a year that are all good. Like a Riley Reef type. Like, they're not great, but they're not going to lose you the game. Like, give me 3 or 4 guys for $4 or $5 million a year who are going to be fine. Because whatever the value is of those guys making 15, 16, they're not worth 3 or 4 times what these other guys give you. I don't understand that. I wouldn't do it. I'd rather have 7 guys making between 3 to 5 million than paying some of these guys what some of them are getting. I don't know if you agree or not, Willie, but that's my philosophy.
Coming from a former guard.
I think Joe Thuney made his hay in the Super Bowl when he went against Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
He was able to kind of knuckle up one-on-one and come and have a couple ISOs. So a lot of people were heavy on him. And then he stayed relatively healthy. And I think that's the name of the game. A lot of these guys who did get paid, they're kind of not nicked as bad as, you just talked about Fisher and Schwartz. I'm a guy who came off Achilles injury. That's a long process, man. Like it's just the function in your foot, just feeling balance in your stance. I remember I was getting bull rushed coming off Achilles, and I couldn't feel my foot just because it was so fatigued and did. I remember I was trying to do we had an ace block, and I can literally remember pounding my foot, the whole giddy up, pounding my foot on the ground and saying into my head like, I can't feel my feet. You know what I mean? So just getting that back, that's a lot. So I have sympathy for a lot of guys who are nicked, but the guys that are not nicked, they're not getting paid because they're not, they're talented. They're getting paid because, they're still drivable. So,
yeah,
I wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
unless they're like Steven's boy Ryan Jensen, just so I can purely be entertained by him killing dudes all game. I would pay for Ryan. I would pay for what Ryan Jensen does to people. I would pay extra for that. I think there's a lot of value in that. I would pay for that, dude.
He was a guy I would crack the bank for, because he's the guy that's going to play with his shoulder out of the socket.
He is my favorite player in the NFL. I don't mean favorite offensive lineman. I mean, he's my favorite player in the NFL. If like anybody listening, if you ever just want to watch one offensive lineman, please make it Ryan Jensen. He's not as pretty as some of the other guys, but that is how you play the position. Like, blocking people is not fun. Trying to kill another guy, that is fun. Like trying to physically, as hard as you can, that's what's fun. Not just, I blocked the guy. Right. It's fun that like Jensen's, there's not enough guys out there anymore really doing people. Jensen's trying to do somebody every play, and I love him for it.
He is an unemployed father of 3. He is always looking for work. Always. We just had him on the podcast a couple weeks ago. You know, he's doing this off season. He's going bear hunting in Alaska.
Yeah, he is. and by the way, he's using a knife.
Right. A butter knife.
Yeah. Ross, this was awesome. You gave us way more time than we asked for. Appreciate it. You are the man. Loved having you on, and we'll have to link up soon.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Awesome being on with you guys. Great show. Thank you so much for having me.
Always,
All right.
brother. Great job, man. Keep kicking ass.
Go deep.